Chris Shao is a New York-based designer who founded Chris Shao Studio in 2016. With offices in New York and Shanghai, he has a broad design footprint spanning across high-end residential and commercial projects across the globe. And Chris is known for his signature touches to everyday essentials with respects to functions and materialities while remaining avant-garde in reinterpreting contemporary classic. And which is why we're so happy to be joined by Chris himself today. And we will be chatting about authentic twist in everyday design. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And the pleasure is ours. Will you first tell us about yourself, your background, and about the studio?
Yeah, so my name is Chris. Born and raised in China, came to the US since I was 19 for college. So my starting story is a typical study abroad kids from Asia and pursue academic achievement in the US. So when I first started school, my parents really forced me to study something really not my interest, which is business. They just keep saying it's a great foundation for you to pursue any other academic interests in the later time. And in my family, they really value education a lot. So by default, I need a graduate school degree. So that was like no discussion. So I went to University of Illinois, kind of like the middle of nowhere in the Midwest. Um, Things are not really creative and inspiring per se comparing to New York and California. So I had a really rough time in college, just feel like I don't fit in, because deep inside I'm always being have this creative spirit and want to do something really different. So after I finished college, I told my parents I really want to study something more creative and design based. So I was debating between fashion design and interior and apply for several schools. So fortunately, I got into New York School of Interior Design, which is a very good academic training as interior, and the degree will allow me to have interior design license. That is something really important to me as well. The whole school program is 3 years. So by the time I finish 4 years undergrads plus a 3 year graduate school and a gap year, I was already 28. And at the age of 28, I never work a day in my life. And that gives me a huge anxiety because all my other friends back home, they're already so successful, promoted twice, or one of my friend went to TED Talk and sharing business ideas, and I was in school doing my final exam. So that anxiety really hits me when I was in New York, you know. Also, it's February, 3 months approaching to graduation, and just the whole thing just put me down and have this huge anxiety of my future and what I should do. So at that time, I Googled or connected with the bidding, which is a little opportunity in the city that they're looking for designers designing a lobby without sharing much of the information. So I entered the bidding as a student 3 months before my graduation, and I don't know what happened. I won the bidding. I won the bidding of a lobby design in the center of Soho, and it turned out the whole project is 100 unit condo rental. It's 100 unit multifamily units in Manhattan. So it's a mega project. So I need to design 100 units and amenity and lobby. So it's like a real building. So I won the bidding without knowing how much of a skill that I will get myself into and without sharing that I was a student to my
Mhm.
client. So I formed my business overnight and 3 months before graduation with like a day before the bidding was literally the highest point of my anxiety level. So that's how I started my business. It was very ballsy, it was unexpected, unheard of, and it was a lot of stress, but I'm really grateful for how courageous that I was to push myself out of the envelope and push myself like really far. And once, you know, that was like a really lucky moment, but once you get there, there's a lot of learning that I need to do because I do miss a lot of um like corporate trainings. So back to my story about study business in my undergrads, it really helped and I guess my parents were right. It
Mm.
really helped to start a business and form a solid foundation. And with just all the invoices, the tax, or like how to operate your company within budget. It's um, really some knowledge that I acquired in undergrads. So that was 2018. So I know I formed my studio 16. I was doing a small project for my um, family friends, but 2018 was the official starting point of how I started Shao Studio in New York. And we all know COVID started into 2020. So 2 years later, right before I finished a project in Manhattan, COVID happened. So I went back to China and just visit my family during COVID and kind of locked down in the country. So I have no option but starting my business in Shanghai as well. So um, in the past, I think in Asia, majority of the high-end projects are hired by the developers and looking for designers from the West, especially New York, Europe. But during COVID, because none of them can travel, and with the New York background and this international vision of design, I was very lucky to oppose to a lot of opportunities in Shanghai as well. So within 2 years, which is the whole period, the duration of COVID, my studio grew from um, 2 employee in Shanghai to 40 people.
That's amazing.
And I think that was my second luck out of the bidding. So now we have a total employee around 40 to 50 because we have some freelancers and covering practice, private residence, hospitality, and real estate development. So that's me.
That's amazing. I love how it all comes full circle.
Yeah. I guess everything has a logic, and then you just need to do the things, either short term or long term, and know where you're gonna get to without just, blindly put your effort in things that you don't trust. So I think I have a really good intuition and logic about what's the approach and what's the route that I will enter.
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
So I'm curious about how you approach design. So what's your design approach and maybe what inspired it initially?
So I always think, well, interior design is a very visual um, practice. Um, Same as fashion design, like most of the people would judge just by the look. But I think the narrative is really important for my practice, because when we look at an interior space online or social media, it's always the visual photographs that help you experience the design. But I believe for a 3D dimensional, like three-dimensional space, the walking experience and the whole transition is really important too. And that's quite missing from a lot of media, social media. But now we have TikTok, like that's another game that help people to experience the space in a different way. But being narrative is something that I really care about. Like people enter the space and what story they're getting and what story I'm telling my audience and telling my client, I think it's really important. It doesn't need to be very deep or very I'm not discussing like human rights or something in a restaurant, but I think the narrative has to cover a very personal touch and a very inspiring stories that I want to translate from interiors to the audience.
So in your opinion, what makes a good storytelling or design narrative that sparks emotions and meanings?
Yeah, I think to make the audience emotional and feel like they resonate with the story is really important. I don't want to tell a story, for example, in Shanghai about a British, a fairy tale. That doesn't resonate with the audience. I think being cultural, localized, and have something really impactful to your audience is really important. So I want people enter my space and feeling emotional, not like to cry or something, but more excited about discovering the space. I realized like for the recent restaurant in EHB, which is a Norwegian Michelin star chef, a lot of people are so excited to enter the space because the mansion is a historical heritage place, and there's one political celebrities used to live there. So people are really curious about how the space is translated into a restaurant. So we do have the program about certain floor, call it living floor, living room, tea room, and PDR, some name that really give the spirit of this mention. And people are really emotional and excited to explore. And when they sit here, they always ask me, where's the bathroom? I can't wait to see it, like how you design it. I think that kind of emotion really makes me satisfied as a designer because people are curious about your space, not just sit here and being very passively receiving all the messages I've been sending. They have that initiative to explore and discover the space. I think that's really satisfying as a designer.
That's super cool. In
Mm.
what ways do you include a subtle approach in every project that helps reshape the way people think about design and, even better, positively impact or influence their life and surroundings?
I think I love culture so much, and I always do my research before I design anything, even for a private residence. I think the subtle change and the twist is really important to be not too shallow. So for the restaurant design, for example, the chef is from Norway, which is well known in a region where design is minimalism. But Shanghai and China is really not. But not saying that a bit like because in Shanghai, like the style is very Art Deco, it's very decorative, and people want decorations. They don't want like a plain canvas. So I think how to merge that two together is a very subtle play. So I find the architectural structure beauty in Chinese buildings, which is the 榫卯结构, which is called mortise and tenon, which means the joints of the two woods have no screws. The same in Japan, like they can just join it perfectly. I think that's a very minimal mindset about how they structure a building is we don't need any screw, we have no hardware, it's just natural wood joined together. So we using that elements as a minimalism representation in this restaurant. However, we make all the joints as a decoration. So we expose them on the wall for people to see. So it's kind of like using a very minimalism structural elements, but on the surface and being presented and decorated in a way that the wall used to be. Subtle plate is something that I really love. And when people enter the space, they're not saying confused, but they're just feeling curious about why these decorations and these drawings are on the wall. And I think the narrative will be we're finding the merge and the synergy between the minimalism from Norway to China.
Wow, really love the thought behind.
Mm.
Cool. So, will you want to share with us one of your projects and maybe the outcome of it?
So I want to share the project Ensu, which is also a fine dining restaurant whose chef is Christopher Costo, a three-star Michelin chef from Napa. And that is the very first restaurant that I designed in Shenzhen on the top floor of Shangri-La Hotel. So speaking about how to translate a narrative and a personal experience into the space, um, I think this is a good representation of my practice. So before designing this restaurant, I visit the chef in Napa, and he was asking me the question. He's he's asking me the question about what is luxury to me, and I repeated myself. Emotion is very luxurious to me because I think that's something really precious. And then he pointed out a tree just next to us in his farm, and he's like, "This is luxury to me. Like nature, every piece of it is luxury." So starting designing this restaurant, I think celebrating nature and the raw materiality is very important because that's what represents luxury for the chef. And obviously for a fine dining restaurant and Shenzhen, like people are looking for things that's really out there and not something as a norm. So so that's like a good starting point about locking the key concept of this whole restaurant. And in the design, you can see we are staying very true and honest with the materials. which means if it's a wood has a natural vein or a texture, we keep it. We didn't do a second treatment or anything on natural materials. So everything is celebrating the luxury of being nature and wabi-sabi feelings. So the narrative of the whole story is my personal experience in driving into Napa in the middle of the night and taste the food and then leave the next morning. So when you enter the space, you feel the mood. It's a very dark, mysterious atmosphere once you entering it. And on the wall of the reception, we have a mural portraying the landscape of Napa. And interestingly, that in Canton, during the time before China is open to the whole world, Canton is the only port allowed to exporting the goods to the Western countries. So there are tons of teas, porcelain exported from Canton. And one thing that's really important is the chinoiserie wallpaper, which is very dominant in the UK, Netherlands, and Paris. So the wealthy class in Europe used to buy wallpaper portraying the landscape of China or the Daily Mandan seen as Asia on their wall and being exotic. So people at the time always bragging, oh, my family is in Asia and exploring, so they bring back the exotic goods. So we use the same treatment, but portraying a Napa landscape in China and find that being an exotic element. And it's all hand-painted mural, which I think is really special how that cultural exchange is being portrayed in a different way. And all the reception desk and the handles are custom-made bronze of the deer horn. Because when I was driving to Napa, there are tons of deers that I witnessed. So that whole experience, you walk in and instantly feel you're in somewhere else. You're in California, having the chill night. They're wearing a sweater. So that is something that I really want the audience to feel instantly once they walk in the space. And as you enter the restaurant, you will see the lighting is very theatrical. So all the table lights are the only illumination in this whole restaurant, besides some of the wall sconces that we design on the wall. So it feels like you're eating under the star sky and there's only few sparkles on the wall that representing how dark like Napa Valley is at night. And we get the full canvas on the food. So that is the main character of the restaurant. One thing I really want to address for restaurant design is I'm not the star of the whole um, practice. The chef is. So it's a very different mindset as how you design something different. I think the main character has to be like I constantly remind myself that the main character is the chef and the main presentation is the food and the interior is a good complementary environment to how the chef want to tell the cooking philosophy. So I think to have that in my mind, I think I did a great job of how to represent the chef in a way, but also merge the local culture in it without adding too much of a me per se in the conversation, which is much more appreciated in the restaurant design because people who came to a Michelin star restaurant, they're looking for the chef and then experience the atmosphere that could be in good coordination with the cooking philosophy instead of like going to Disney and then see what is up and then the food become the secondary role. So I think that restaurant design is a good representation of that.
Wow, super cool. Would
Mm,
love to see it in real life.
yeah.
Mhm. So lastly, what do you think are the keys in adding a twist in everyday designs that will craft timeless authenticity in future times?
I think be honest is a very not saying that people lie, but like the honesty and truth to material is really important to me because there's so many fabrication of materials and culture that I don't like in the scene. Well, because like even you go to Japan, you go to like all the countries in Asia, there are always some fabricated Western environment that doesn't feel like right in this space. It's like something really gaudy and French, but like people don't live in that way. I think that's stay on truth with how people live. I think the twist, the priority and the predominant condition is we have to stay really true and loyal to how we live under the certain culture. I spent half of my time in New York, and the way we design a New York project is very different than how we design a project in Shanghai, because the audience need to experience the interior and the inspiration based on their daily life and the lifestyle they pursue. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, thank you
Mm.
so much for sharing today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah,
Love
of
learning
course.
about you as a person and your designs. Looking forward to more of your projects soon.
Yeah, amazing.
So
Thank
much.
you.